This is CBC Vancouver News.
It's become a daily occurrence for us now as correctional officers.
Drug drops from the sky. How drones are delivering to BC prisons and the fight to stop them.
And we anticipate that the new PNE Amphitheater will be one of the most spectacular venues of its sort in North America.
The PNE unveils plans for a brand new concert venue, what it's made of and what it will cost.
People are more aware of their habitat needs, their life cycle, to really just get more of a bit of a love-in for Western painted turtles.
And the big push to save a tiny creature in the Kootenays. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Guards in BC prisons say they are dealing with big problems from above. Drones dropping drugs into prison yards. It's become one of the most popular ways to deliver contraband to people on the inside. Our Kuljeet Kaila looks at the growing problem and how authorities may be able to fight it.
Drones are a rising concern across Canadian prisons. It's literally this easy for drugs to fall from the sky. Now, this is just a mock simulation of what it could look like, but we're about to see just how big of a problem this really is.
This is in the last 3 to 5 years has become insane. It's absolutely insane.
This was found crashed by the Matsqui prison in Abbotsford.
So what do you think makes this similar to ones that you've seen?
Well, it's the tape, so you can see that they've got tape covering any sort of lights on the drone itself to make sure that to conceal its identity. You can see on the bottom here that this is obviously some sort of device the package was probably hooked onto to drop it. Here in the Pacific region, we're seeing multiple a week between our 9 institutions, but across the country, they're multiple a day. So it's become a daily occurrence for us.
And the drops can mean serious consequences. Last year, Randall says at the Matsqui prison, a single drop carrying fentanyl killed 1 person, saw 9 inmates overdose and taken to the emergency room, and 39 others needing medical support. This drone package was found with 13 ounces of crystal meth last fall.
It had a street value of around $7,800, and because of the supply and demand at the time, institutional value was around $180,000. Crystal meth getting into our institutions is extremely scary for everybody.
Items like that are causing debt among inmates to increase, not to mention more violence, made worse by weapons being dropped too. Hacksaw blades and ceramic knives, to name a few, also cell phones. In 2019, Correctional Services Canada committed to spending $6 million to install drone detection technology in 6 prisons. But the Union of Canadian Correctional Officers says there are huge delays. So to your knowledge, how many of the prisons have the new technology fully operating since 2019?
None. So far, they are installing the one in Donnacona, and we are still waiting for the tests.
Corrections won't say how many prisons have the technology. It says sharing their techniques to combat the introduction of contraband could create security vulnerabilities. It says we are currently working with different vendors on various methods for detecting drones. We will measure the performance of these systems and determine the potential for broader national deployment.
This camera can detect drones from pixels.
Meanwhile, this BC company, BlueVec Technology, says it's one of those vendors hoping Corrections chooses its technology.
So we call that the fingerprint of the drone. So when we can ID the make, model, and serial number, it's called fingerprinting it. Really, the secret sauce is the ability to geolocate the pilot for apprehension purposes.
20 U.S. prisons are currently using the company's device, and the hope is to one day be part of the solution in Canada. Kuljeet Kaila, CBC News, Pitt Meadows.
Mounties in North Vancouver are trying to figure out what led to a crash involving a Surrey RCMP officer on the North Shore earlier tonight. It happened on 19th Street and St. Andrews Avenue. The force says a police car collided with another vehicle. They say no one was seriously hurt, while the officer involved is a Mountie from Surrey who was working in North Vancouver. It's still not clear what led to that crash. The BC government has settled a dispute with Telus Health. The Medical Services Commission was seeking a court injunction over allegations the company's fee-based Life Plus program was charging patients for services that should be covered by the public system. Mira Baines has more on the deal announced today.
The Medical Services Commission has reached an agreement with Telus Health to comply with the Medicare Protection Act. That means no more court action against Telus regarding its Life Plus program. And Telus has agreed to stop enrolling members in its Life Plus program, but those members who are already enrolled get to keep their family doctor. Now, there were allegations that Telus Health was using its Life Plus program to charge people $3,000 to $5,000 a year in order to get access to a family doctor. There's no financial penalties for the company. Health Minister Adrian Dix talked about the agreement.
Since the application was filed, Telus has demonstrated to the Commission's satisfaction that it will make the agreed-upon modifications to its Life Plus program. I am delighted. To ensure compliance going forward, Telus will no longer offer physician services to new clients through its Life Plus program.
Telus also released a statement today, and to summarize, the company said it's modifying some of its programs and clearly will be indicating the line between insured and uninsured services. Critics are asking, where is the deterrent for a large company like Telus if it isn't being financially penalized? The BC Green Party was at the forefront of bringing the issue to light last year.
Frankly, we've seen this privatized healthcare system under the BC NDP continuing to grow, despite their rhetoric saying that they support accessible, equitable, universal healthcare. And so really quite surprised to see that there's not any penalties, that they're clearly they were told that they have to stop doing what they were doing, and yet no penalties is really curious to us.
That being said, there's still an outstanding case against Harrison Healthcare in Vancouver. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
After months of back and forth, the province is set to make a decision on the future of policing in Surrey by the end of this week. Will it be the Surrey Police Service or the RCMP? For more on this, we turn to our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy. Justin, highly contentious to say the least for politicians and people living in Surrey. What are the key arguments?
Yeah, Dan, I don't think anyone's going to be swayed by the arguments one way or the other. After months of debate, an election was fought over this. But finally, on Friday, Solicitor General Mike Farnworth is going to make his announcement on what the province has chosen. And in terms of the things that might be brought up on that day, well, if he says that the SPS is going and that the RCMP will stay, it's about municipal control. The fact that Surrey Council and Mayor Brenda Locke voted to say that they wanted to keep the RCMP and get rid of the Surrey Police Force. He could also say that the police force is still small enough to be disbanded relative to the RCMP, and he could say that the RCMP will be cheaper long-term for Surrey because of the economies of scale with a national force. On the other hand, if he says that it's the SPS that is going to stay and the RCMP has to go, he could cite the limited local mandate that Locke only won the election by a tiny amount over Doug McCallum and that it was a 5-4 vote on council. He could cite staffing issues across the province right now for police services and says that going back on the Surrey Police Force evolution would only make things more difficult. And they could also cite the fact that the RCMP's time as a major force in this province might have been in the past, particularly with the province saying, or at least exploring the idea of a province-wide police force at some point in the future. So those are just some of the arguments. Again, there's been this back and forth for many months now, fighting between the Surrey Police Force and the RCMP. I think most voters in Surrey just hoping for a resolution one way or the other.
So what is the political fallout we may see here once a decision is announced?
Well, if Farnworth chooses at the end of the day for the RCMP to stay in Surrey, the fallout, there's going to be a lot of anger from the Surrey Police Force and some politicians in Surrey, particularly those who supported former Mayor Doug McCallum, but it will be fairly minimal in the long term. However, if he decides to basically disagree with Mayor Brenda Locke and say, no, the RCMP has to go, that will cause a huge backlash at City Hall. Policing traditionally seen as a local issue to take control of. However, it's up to the province to say at the end of the day which one is going to stick here. Certainly, the province has to decide whether they're willing to risk the political capital over the long term in fighting with the second largest city in BC if they choose to go against their wishes for the future of policing.
And we find out on Friday. Municipal Affairs reporter Justin McElroy, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
An Uber driver from Abbotsford who was attacked by a passenger last week is now pushing for better protections for gig workers. Aman Sood's dashcam captured the attack on video. He says it's left him in a lot of pain and unable to work regularly.
They want us to have a commercial inspection. They check our criminal record, and they want us to be insured, commercial insurance for the passenger safety. And now I understood that passenger safety is there, but if they have a $4 ride and they make some excuse or accident or something, they are not taking any kind of responsibility and they're not standing for drivers.
Sood and the president of the BC Federation of Labour met with BC's Minister of Labour earlier today at the legislature to talk about workplace protections and injury coverage.
Regardless who the employer is, I think our emphasis always is the workers, their health and safety, because employer, no matter who they are, their responsibility is the health and safety of their employees. And when they are injured, when they are ill, then what kind of support is available to them? And we want to make sure that they are covered.
Now, our Anita Bath spoke earlier with a representative for Uber and asked what, if anything, the ride-hailing company is doing for Aman Sood since he was attacked while on the job.
Why wait for the government to make changes on this? Why not just protect workers on your own?
So as I mentioned, the Employment Standards Act in British Columbia right now sees drivers as independent contractors. So we can't introduce this ourselves because otherwise drivers would be considered employees. And this would take away the unique nature of app-based work, which is the flexibility. You know, people choose to drive on Uber because they enjoy this flexibility. They need this flexibility. Flexibility being able to drive when, where, and if you want.
So it's fair to say then that Uber does believe it should be liable to its drivers like every other company is in the province and wants those changes?
Well, we believe app-based work is different than traditional employment, and that more needs to be done to make this work better for those who choose app-based work. But we recognize that the current Employment Standards Act is not something that supports app-based work, and it needs to be modernized. The BC government is actually doing consultations right now to see how they could modernize app-based work, and we're participating in that. You know, we know they've been speaking to a number of drivers, and what we put forward is a package of reforms that would bring new benefits and protections to drivers, one of them being occupational accident coverage that would cover injuries sustained during engaged time, which is, you know, the time that a driver picks up a rider and drops them off.
People wanting to enjoy an outdoor concert in Metro Vancouver will eventually have a new and shiny option, a brand new amphitheater at the PNE. Check this out. The lofty design is set to hold between 1,500 and 10,000 people. Once it's built, officials say it will feature the largest free-span timber roof structure on Earth. It'll be a mixed-use venue for concerts, arts and culture programming, as well as community events, and meets sustainability standards.
This project adheres to the highest standards of environmental sustainability. The new amphitheater will be a showcase for British Columbia's building products and engineering capacity, and we anticipate that the new PNE Amphitheater will be one of the most spectacular venues of its sort in North America.
Construction is set to begin next year with a grand opening scheduled for 2026. After that, it's expected to host more than 75 performances every year. People in BC's Sudanese community are understandably worried. Sudan is now into the second week of a violent power struggle between the armed forces and a paramilitary force. Canada is deploying about 200 troops to help coordinate to get civilians out of the country. But the Sudanese Canadian Society of BC is worried about the deteriorating conditions for those who cannot leave.
My name is Khalid Babikir Noor Osman. I'm a Sudanese, being in Canada for the last 2.5 years here in BC. What we have done through, we having unified the effort what we had among all the communities in Canada, from Toronto, Hamilton, every single city where they're having the Sudanese community. We're having a meeting every day. We're trying to locate the people in Sudan with the addresses, phone numbers, and where are they. We are concerned about the increase of the violence in Khartoum, the shortage in all powers, electricity power station being targeted by the militia, and they bombing all of the areas. There is no water, there is no electricity, there's a shortage in medical assistance. The food, again, and that seems to be going to be starvation very soon in Khartoum.
One of BC's biggest mining companies canceled a scheduled vote today that would have determined the future of its operations. The shareholders' vote was meant to finalize Teck Resources' proposal to split into two companies. Teck Metals would focus on metal production, including copper and zinc, while Elk Valley Resources would mine metallurgical coal used to make steel. The company is now opting for what it calls a more direct approach. This comes as Teck faces a hostile takeover from Swiss company Glencore. It's been urging shareholders to vote against splitting up the company. 10 new rules are now in place restricting boat speeds and routes meant to protect BC's endangered southern resident killer whales. Transport Canada, along with Fisheries and Oceans and the Federal Environment Ministry, are enforcing low-speed zones in areas off the coast of Vancouver Island where orcas feed on salmon, and banning vessel traffic or fishing in dedicated sanctuary zones. The DFO is also considering a year-round restriction on vessels to stay 400 meters from all killer whales along our coast. Despite being protected by a hardy shell, there's still plenty of risk if you're a turtle. How a group in the Kootenays is trying to help some tiny creatures. You'll want to see this. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Thanks for being here. Concern about food insecurity is on the rise in Canada. In Calgary, one man's food cart operation is addressing access to good food while providing a delicious lunch.
Seems like this is the popular one today. We can make a difference and run a business. It doesn't have to be not-for-profit profit anymore. Is your bread? Hi, I'm Tyler Melnick, and I'm the founder of No Fixed Address. I help close the food gap, reducing our waste, while also recognizing that people are suffering in our cities. And I do it through a pay-it-forward model. So paying it forward is $5 to cover the cost of a soup.
So 2 soups.
2 soups?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just drop it in the bowl, and as soon as the soup's ready, we'll make sure to give someone a meal.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. The Huggable is destined to be given away to whoever is facing food insecurity at that moment. Is it 3? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So all I need you to do is pass me the token that's in the bowl right there. That represents the soup that somebody's paid forward. Thank you. Came out from Burlington, Ontario to go to Haskayne School of Business. And when I did, I created a big gap between my family and I. And it's during that time that my dad became more and more disenfranchised, since I wasn't checking in or as close with him. He'd always struggled with his own issues, and he became further and further disconnected. And it was one of my last visits home that a friend of mine came and told me that where he was sleeping, and he showed me. It was a bench down at the lake, right on the shores of Lake Ontario. This is creating a legacy for my dad, and this is keeping his memory alive. I have been approached by several other people who've heard the stories, and they've said to me, when can we get this? One of the groups that came to me is actually from Hamilton. They said, look, we're fundraisers. We don't run businesses, but we can get the people in place, and we really want to make this happen in Hamilton. And to me, that was the full circle. It's like what I started here could actually possibly go back to the city where I last saw my dad. I'm just unbelievable. I was tearful. This is your soup, and spoons are here, napkins, salt and pepper, and I'll get you your bread.
It was a special day for kids and reptiles and some adults in one Kootenay community as they marked Turtle Day. Western painted turtles are known as a blue list species because their habitat is at risk. And at this time of year, the creatures begin to emerge from their nests looking for water. As Corey Bullock shows us, one local group is trying to help save more of the tiny animals.
There's another little guy poking his head up.
Turtles are beginning to emerge from their nests.
They've been under this ground alive since last August, and they've just stayed under there. We have found some that have come out already, and these ones have not quite come up yet.
Greg Ross is a member of the Rocky Mountain Naturalists. He monitors the turtles and their nests all year long.
We can put them closer to the water because I don't like to leave them just like on the beach or on the sand and just leave them on their own, because it's amazing, like the predators that will come. And that's why they're called Western painted turtles.
Habitat loss from human activity has threatened the southern interior population of Western painted turtles for decades.
Way back in the day, in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, the city was real gung-ho to get this all just like filled in.
Luckily, that didn't happen. But there are other concerns, like skunks who also prey on the young hatchlings. Ross says that without intervention, Western painted turtles would lose 90% of their nests to predators.
In this situation, only about 10% are predated, and we're hoping for 0%.
Ross and others have been monitoring the nests for the last 30 years. They work closely with the BC Fish and Wildlife Compensation Program.
So Turtle Day is really about encouraging the local school kids to come and the public later on in the day.
And today, some elementary school kids watched demonstrations of how the nests are tended to and dug up in the spring.
So people are more aware of their habitat needs, their life cycle, and to really just get more of a bit of a love-in for Western painted turtles. I mean, that's what it's all about.
The group say they hope the educational opportunity will keep the turtles around for generations to come. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
Here's a live shot of Cambie Street in City Hall. We started with rain, ended with some sun on the south coast. More is on the way, but so are high stream flow advisories in the southern interior and near Prince George. The snow begins to melt with the higher temperatures. Kuljeet will have your BC-wide forecast right after this.
In a brief to the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, DIRA indicated it would try and purchase a large Skid Row hotel with a beer parlor. Rather than make money from the sale of beer and wine, the association would invest any profit from the venture into housing for the East Side. Room rents in the hotel would subsidize residents who wish to stay there, and other accommodation could be found for others in the area who lack adequate living quarters. Bruce Erickson, the president of DIRA, says it is a feasible plan.
We decided that we would form a nonprofit housing corporation and try to buy up some of the hotels which have a very high vacancy or vacancy rate, and to convert those hotels, and at the same time use the beer parlors that exist there to help subsidize the rents. We think that we can run a beer parlor better than at least some of the operators in this area, so at the same time we could demonstrate to them how a good business should be run.
How would you operate it differently?
First of all, there would be absolutely no serving of booze to drunks. I mean, you know, some of these hotels, they serve beer to people, they fall out of their chairs. We would provide coffee, sandwiches, entertainment, and kinds of entertainment that the customers can participate in. But, you know, we'd make sure that no people walked out of our establishment in a state of intoxication.
Erickson insists he's serious about the proposal. The next step is up to CMHC. Bob Gillingham, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join Leanne Young at Vancouver Magazine's 34th Annual Restaurant Awards on May 15th. The prestigious awards honor the city's greatest places to eat and the folks who make them special. For tickets, visit vanmag.com. And the Doxa Documentary Film Festival returns May 4th to 14th. Enjoy thoughtful and engaging documentaries, special presentations, industry events, and more. Get your tickets at doxafestival.ca.
A high-flying rehearsal today for the upcoming coronation of King Charles. There's an old soldier. Military aircraft took to the sky over the Royal Air Force Base in Cranwell, England. 30 planes and helicopters will do a flyover at Buckingham Palace in London on the day of the coronation. It will be the UK's first in 70 years. King Charles became monarch when Queen Elizabeth died in September, but his actual crowning takes place on Saturday, May 6th.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Kuljeet Kaila has our BC-wide weather forecast. Started a bit damp on the south coast today, Kuljeet, but we did a bit of a what's it called? Pivot. That's the word.
We pivoted and did a really nice turnaround. Sunshine this afternoon all day, and it will last into tomorrow. But across the province, we did have a couple of warnings, a wind warning for the Caribou region around Prince George, up to 70-kilometer-an-hour winds this afternoon, a chance of some thunderstorm activity as well. But across the province tomorrow, we will see sunshine for Williams Lake with some cloud. Like I said, look at that thunderstorm activity for Prince George tomorrow at 13 degrees. Lots of sun for Kelowna and 18, 17 in Cranbrook. Some wet conditions along the coast from Dease Lake down to Prince Rupert and Port Hardy, sitting at a steady 10 degrees there. Some notes for today. Today's high was right around the average as well as the low. Humidity sitting at 90 degrees. Our next really nice sunny day is going to be Saturday. Everybody's counting down to Saturday. We're going to see 22 degrees by the water, up to 28 degrees inland in the valley. Before we get there, we're going to see a very similar day tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Mostly sunny conditions for Friday, hot day on Saturday, a decent day on Sunday as well. So your weekend, make those plans to get outdoors. You're not going to regret it. More cloud rolls in for the beginning of next week for Monday, but temperatures will start to dip down. We'll hit our high around 22 degrees on Saturday, and then a steady decline for a few days. Not too bad by Tuesday or Wednesday, so lots of sunshine in the forecast. I feel like we can put those umbrellas away or safely lose them for a few days.
We're not going to hold you to that legally, but it's a nice thing to look forward to.
Yes.
Thanks, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
That's your late news for Wednesday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news at any hour, check your website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That begins tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. Have a good night.